Make sure to download the file with the fabric estimate, layout and cutting guides, and assembly instructions for this project. In this first video tutorial, we will be discussing at length how to prepare and applique the pieces for the first block in this project, which is the Art Studio. A lot of what we will be covering here will be applicable to the remaining blocks, so any further video tutorials will be dealing only with the specifics of each particular block and will not cover the use of materials and the preparation and sewing of the pieces in as depth as in this video tutorial. You should also download the file with the first room or block for this project, which is the Art Studio. This is a large block, but we have included the full-size design so you don't need to worry about enlarging it. However, you will have to print out and join 6 sections to obtain the full-size design. You will also note we have provided you with the right side or original orientation of the design, and also with a reversed image. Choose whichever one applies to the applique method of your choice. I will be working with both. I will use the original or the right side of the image to trace registration marks onto my background block. And with the reversed image, I will be preparing each of my applique pieces. Note that these tutorials will be referring to the fusible machine applique method I like to use when working with a complex design such as this one. So let's begin. I've cut my block background fabric 23 by 15 inches to allow for any shrinkage from the large number of pieces I will be sewing on. Once I finish appliquing all the pieces, I will trim this block to 21.5 by 13.5. I have also joined all the sections of the design into one complete block, both with the design right side up and with the reversed image. I will use the block with the design right side up to lay my background fabric on and trace some registration marks. You don't need to trace the entire design. Simply an outline, okay, to guide you when you're laying down, especially the large pieces. You can use whatever pencil or marker you like. Just make sure that it's a washable product. You can also do it the other way around. Place some tracing paper on the right side of the fabric. Place your design on top. And then trace the outline. Once again, going around kind of the larger pieces. Next, we will start to prepare our pieces. Because I will be sewing my pieces by machine, I will be applying a fusible product to the back of the pieces of fabric to stabilize them. Now, what to use is entirely up to you. There are several very good products on the market. Let's take a look at some of them. First, we have a product called Wonder Under. It's a regular weight paper-backed fusible web. I like this particular product when working with pieces of the applique pieces for a wall hanging. I would not really recommend this for a bed or lap quilt because it leaves kind of a thick adhesive on it, and that makes kind of a stiff block, which works really wonderfully if what you're doing is wall hanging that you want it to hang pretty straight. Not so much if you want the soft hand for a bed or lap quilt. Another product is Heat and Bond. This is also a very good product, and it comes in different weights. Like Wonder Under, I would also say that you'd have to be careful with the weight that you're using depending on the use of the quilt, if it is for a bed quilt or if it's a wall hanging. Misty Fuse is a really popular product. It gives you a really light hand, and I think that's why people like it so much. It is a little bit pricey though, and it is certainly not available easily in countries outside the United States. Another product is Steam-A-Seam. I especially like this number 2. And the reason why I like this product is because you can, once you have put your pieces down, you can move them afterwards. You can change the location if you want, and it will not bond permanently until you iron set it. However, in many countries there are none of these products available. In those cases, what I would recommend, in countries such as my own country, in Ecuador, we do not find any of these products, but what you can find, especially in tailoring, is lightweight interfacing. And if you can find it with glue on the backside, that's really great. So you can use this. It works really, really well, just as well as any of the other products. In my country especially, it's actually very cheap. If you can't find fusible interfacing, you can just use regular interfacing and use some type of fabric glue to adhere it to your fabrics, although it is not really that recommended because it will not seal the edges of the fabric once the piece has been cut. The product that I actually like the best is put out by Floriani, and it's called applique stick. It's I really like this because you can run it through the printer, and you can also, once you've cut out your pieces, you've applied this to the fabric, you've cut out your pieces, you can also move them until you are satisfied with the placement of the pieces, and then you can heat set it for a complete bonding. It also has a very soft hand, so I find that this is very appropriate for either bed quilts or wall hangings, whatever you would like. Because this is a large block with lots of pieces, I recommend dividing it into 3 sections. You'll see that this is the way the numbering works on the patterns, starting kind of with this middle section. And then working with first one or the other, which way. And this particular pattern, I have numbered this section first, then followed by this section, this, and then ending with this section. However, I myself actually prefer to applique the large pieces first, so it would be like, you know, this is in the background. So this would go first, followed by these large pieces, and I would leave all these smaller pieces to the end. So then I would move on to this. These are all large pieces. And then I would also applique these large pieces, and I would leave all these small ones for the end. There's no right or wrong way here. It really is a matter of preference. For layered pieces, like the picture on the wall, I try to reduce the bulk. So after tracing the first piece out onto my fusible product, okay, which is the case of the wide picture frame, I will trace a line inside, which in this case kind of coincides with the second piece. Okay, but I would cut out, I would apply this, I would cut out this whole inside portion. I do this with all large pieces to reduce the amount of adhesive on the back of the fabrics. And I find this is particularly important when layering pieces to reduce the bulk. So, for example here, this would be the first piece. The second one that gets layered, I've done the exact same thing. I've just cut out the inside part to reduce the bulk, right? So this would be going like this. This would be going like this. And with the third piece too also, I have cut out the whole inside part of this. Depending on the way this is going to be quilted, I could also decide to cut out the excess fabric from these two pieces. Just being careful not to cut into the top layer. That way I really reduce a lot of the bulk in this area. So when tracing all my pieces onto the fusible product, you will see I've traced the line, for example, here, but I've cut the paper a little bit larger before fusing it onto the wrong side of my fabric. And this is so that when I go to cut the piece itself, I'm cutting right on the edge, which means that the fusible is applied all the way to the edge of the fabric. The other thing you will notice is that in some of these pieces, I've marked an X, okay? And that is to remind me, for example, here this is number 47, where I've put an X, I'll put an X right where that piece is going to be tucked under another piece. So I always do this to remind me to cut it a little bit bigger, to make sure that I've got enough fabric to tuck under the next piece. Something else I like to do with larger pieces is kind of assemble them by unit. So here in a piece like this, when I've got very large pieces that are going to be tucked under other pieces, I will not use any fusible product on them. I will just cut out the shape a little bit bigger, right? Because all of the edges will be tucked under. And then I will simply go placing the other pieces on top in place. Of course, using my pattern to guide me. See, here we've got pieces that will be tucked under other pieces. Now remember, this product, why I like it is because if I need to, I can pick it up and move it a little bit. Like this wasn't quite fitting, so I can move this one to make sure that the whole piece is covered. And the same on this side. Here we go. This is what's so nice about this particular product, is that you can really move it until you are ready to actually heat set it in place. Okay, so there I have my whole unit ready to be appliqued. Okay, and I don't have to worry about putting on piece by piece, going back to my light box or something to figure out where the piece goes. They're all ready to go. So I can just take this off, place it on my background fabric, and iron it on, and then applique it. Okay, so now I'm going to start appliquing some of the pieces, and I will be working in units. So the one here, this one can be pretty much done all in one sitting. Here, this one too. These are very easy pieces to applique. The middle section is probably the most complicated section. So here I will first start appliquing these 2 units, and then I will be putting on the rolls of that you see in the design. And go something like this, right? Because this one roll is actually partially covered by the next piece, which goes something like this, right? Something like that. Okay, and I need to applique this piece down first before I can move on to the easel, because in this case one of the legs does cover this picture frame partially. Okay, so once all of this is appliqued, then I can move on to finishing the easel itself. What will be left after that are all those teeny tiny pieces, and we will look at that a little bit further on. So something else that we need to discuss is what thread to use. Now, there are different opinions about this, different products that people like, and I think that it really is a matter of choice, what works for you. You will find that a lot of people like one brand over another, and there are also discussions about the color to put in the top and in the bobbin. And normally, what everybody agrees is that you should be using the same thread both in the top and in the bottom. I'm going to propose something that might seem a little bit different, a little audacious. And I'm going to suggest that you consider using monofilament thread in both the top and the bobbin. I like to use the smoky gray for dark fabrics, and then the clear one for light fabrics. And I don't know if you've ever heard of anyone doing this. It doesn't seem like it would work, but it actually does. And the advantage here is that you really don't have to change your thread as often as you would if you're using colors to match your applique pieces. So let's give it a try. Okay, so before starting, I want to talk a little bit about the machine settings I have. My machine set at a blanket stitch, and a very narrow one at a length of 2.0 and a width of 2.5. And I always recommend that you start by practicing on a sample before you commit to your pieces. Okay, so another tip that I want to give you here is, especially since I'm working with a monofilament thread that can be very slippery, what I like to do is start out with just a straight stitch. Okay. So I will take just maybe 2 or 3 stitches, set my blanket stitch, I might have to realign, and then I can start appliquing. Okay. And when I end, at the end, the reason why I do this, first I start with the straight stitches, because by the time I come around, when I get to the point where I started, I still have to go over a few more stitches with my blanket stitch, and that will be covering the loose ends here, so I don't have to worry about taking them to the back and tying them off or anything like that. I can just cut them off there. And the same thing when I end, because when I end, let's say that I have a knit over here. Okay, I'm coming here, and I have all these blanket stitches, and so I can do the exact same thing. Set my machine to a straight stitch, and give it 2 or 3 stitches, and that will tie the ends off for me, so I won't have to worry about taking the threads to the back and tying them off there. Now let's take a look at this. As I said, I'm using monofilament thread in both the top and the back. It's a perfect stitch. And you can barely see the stitch on the front. This is why I like to use this type of thread. So once again, I use the gray for darker fabrics and the clear for light fabrics. I'm going to go ahead and applique my pieces now then. I'm going to pause here to point something out. On a little piece like this one, this area right here is going to be tucked under. And then this and this is what is going to be showing. So in this case, I'm going to stitch a straight line here, just so I can secure the threads. Then I will change to the blanket stitch here, and then I'll come back and with a straight stitch to make sure that those threads are secure. The other thing I should point out is that when I work with monofilament thread, I always bring the bobbin thread up too, so that it doesn't get tangled down below. So the threads, both threads are up. I'll switch here to a blanket stitch, and it's a very small stitch. Okay, and so I've reached the end of that little triangle shape, and I'm just going to use my straight stitch again to secure those threads. And there we go. Okay, so we finished appliquing all our large pieces, and now we're ready to work on those really teeny tiny pieces in this block. So, in theory, we could go ahead and cut out every single one of these little pieces, right? And applique one each separately. It's a lot of work, and some of these pieces are so tiny. The instructions, it says to embroider the pencil tips. And there are different parts where we'll talk about embroidering the pencil tips. But I have another way of working with this that makes it a lot easier. Let's take a look. I like working with fabric paints and pencils. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out all of those small little pieces. This is a piece of pre-treated fabric that's pre-treated for dyeing, or you can also buy this in pre-treated printer sheets if you want to run things through your printer. But in this case, I've just cut a piece and I have applied my fusible product to the back of it. And instead of drawing on the paper here, what I've done is I've drawn on the fabric. Okay. So just using a mechanical pencil, or I like this applique pencil. So I've just drawn out all of the pieces that I'm going to be needing. Okay. And then there's several products on the market that I like. These are crayons. My favorite pencils, though, are these Prismacolor, and I like them because they're very bright, very rich colors. Or the other is textile paints. There's many different products on the market too. These are the ones that are available in my country, and I really like them because they're very good about, they're very color fast, don't run. So any of these products. If you do use the pencils or the crayons, then you do need to set them in a way. In addition to the fabric itself, you can also use a colorless extender. The labels come off of this, but this is a jacquard colorless extender. And so this really helps to set the colors, so that not only if you're going to wash them, but also just so that they don't fade. Even if you're doing this for wall hanging and you're not planning on washing it, you still don't want the colors to fade. So basically, what I will do is, if I use the pencils, okay, I will just color the area, and I'm not going to worry about working outside the lines or anything. I mean, I'm just going to color, even going outside the lines. And I might mix some colors if I want to brighten it up a little bit, or these are supposed to be sponges, right? And I'll just color the different areas. Color the different areas. Let's say that this is this would be like a handle, so let's use like a brown. Okay, it's kind of a dark brown. Okay, and then the other thing that I do like to do is use a micron pen. Not necessarily a black, it can be like a dark brown, to just define some of these areas, like just here and here. Okay, then I will apply the colorless extender. And a little bit goes really far. You don't need to use much. And this is going to protect the color. Okay, and you just let it dry. You can do the same thing with the fabric paints. Anyway, you get the picture there. You know, you just fill in the area. Okay, define the separate pieces. And then you can cut out the piece. I have a couple here that I've already cut out. that I've already finished. And they're ready to be appliqued. So in the next step we will talk about how to applique these things. I do them a little bit different than the bigger pieces. Let's go take a look. Okay, so the difference with these really tiny little pieces is that instead of using a blanket stitch, I'm going to use a very narrow zigzag stitch. And what I'm going to do is, particularly in pieces like this, they're so small that if you were to try to meet in the middle, it would look kind of funny. So what I'm going to do is zigzag over the whole piece, like this. And then I will take a couple of straight stitches back to lock those stitches. Okay. With some of the larger pieces, what I will do then also here is I will start with a narrow zigzag, and I will zigzag the same way over this until I get to the wider part. And in this wider part, I might even decrease the zigzag stitch a little bit, and then I will just stitch over these edges. And then I will finish this off with a straight stitch, just kind of to lock the stitches. And that's what I'll do with the remaining pieces. So here's our finished block. I think it actually turned out quite nicely. The instruction sheet gives you the size that this should be trimmed to, but I would like to suggest that you not do that just yet. The Dollhouse project is actually a great candidate for quilt as you go method. So I'd like to suggest that you quilt each block first and then trim it and use whichever quilt as you go method you like. That way, come December, if you are planning on giving this as a gift, you will have worked quite a bit ahead and you won't have that much to finish it. Just a thought. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and we'll see you next month.